They said Daniel Scott could buy anything, but in one small act of kindness from a girl who had nothing, he found what all his money had failed to give him: peace. She didn't know who he really was when she brought him that cup of coffee, and he didn't know then that she'd change his life forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The city of Northbridge woke slowly each morning, like a tired giant stretching after a long night. Sunlight bounced off glass towers, and the hum of buses and coffee machines filled the streets. In the heart of it all stood Scott Enterprises, a 50-story monument of glass and steel that bore the name of one man, Daniel Scott, the youngest billionaire industrialist in the state. To the world, Daniel was a symbol of success: sharp suits, clean speeches, and magazine covers that called him the modern visionary. But the people who worked for him whispered something different. They said he had changed, that he had become distant, cold, and mechanical. And maybe they were right. Behind the boardroom doors and luxury cars, Daniel was exhausted. Every handshake felt rehearsed, every compliment bought. Even his laughter, he realized one night, sounded hollow. He'd built an empire, but lost sight of what had started it all: his father's simple belief that a business only works when it serves people, not the other way around. It was that thought, echoing through an empty penthouse at 3 a.m., that pushed Daniel toward an unusual decision. 1 week, he would live like the people he'd forgotten. No luxury, no office, no name. By sunrise, his mind was set. That Monday, David Hall showed up at a cleaning agency on the south side of Northbridge. Plain clothes, forged ID, a borrowed backpack. By noon, he was assigned to the night shift at Scott Enterprises, his own company. Meanwhile, on the 12th floor of the same building, Emily Rivera balanced 2 paper cups of cheap coffee and a brown paper bag of sandwiches. She was 24, with calloused hands and tired eyes that still sparkled when she smiled. She'd taken the janitorial job 2 months earlier after her mother's medical bills swallowed what little savings she had. Emily didn't complain much. She hummed songs while she worked, left motivational notes on coworkers' lockers, and always brought extra coffee. One for herself, one for whoever needed it more. That evening, as Daniel, or David, as they called him, awkwardly tried to assemble a mop bucket, Emily noticed him struggling near the supply closet. "Hey, new guy?" she asked, offering a kind smile. Daniel looked up, surprised. Yeah, first day." "Thought so," she chuckled, stepping closer to help. "You're holding that backwards." She fixed the mop handle with practiced ease and handed it back to him. "There, you get used to it." He smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. "Thanks." "No problem." "Oh," she extended a cup toward him. "Coffee? It's not great, but it helps." He hesitated, then took it. "You're giving this to me?" Emily shrugged. "Why not? We all need something warm to keep going, right?" Something about her tone, honest, effortless, human, caught him off guard. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Right." They cleaned in silence for a while, mops swishing, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Daniel found himself watching how carefully she worked, not out of obligation, but out of pride. She smiled at everyone, even the guards who barely nodded back. When they took a break near the lobby windows, Emily leaned against her cart, staring at the city lights below. "You ever wonder what it's like to be up there?" she said softly, pointing toward the penthouse floors. Daniel followed her gaze, heart tightening. "I guess it's not as nice as it looks." She laughed, assuming he was joking. "Yeah, right. People up there don't even wash their own cups." He chuckled lightly, but said nothing more. By midnight, most of the building was empty. Daniel lingered near the conference rooms, his conference rooms, wiping tables and collecting crumpled papers with his own name printed across them. Daniel Scott, CEO. The irony wasn't lost on him. When Emily passed by, she saw the thoughtful look on his face. "You okay?" He nodded. "Just thinking." "Careful," she teased. "Too much thinking in this place can make you sad." Her lightness disarmed him completely. He smiled again, realizing something unexpected. This woman, with her cheap coffee and bright soul, had done something no board member or shareholder ever had. She made him feel seen. As he walked home that night through the drizzle, the billionaire in disguise whispered to himself, "One week might not be enough to learn what she already knows." And somewhere in the quiet streets of Northbridge, a new story had begun, one that would change both their lives forever. The next evening, Daniel arrived early, before the night crew even clocked in. He stood in the empty lobby of Scott Enterprises, still dressed in the plain navy uniform that smelled faintly of bleach. The marble floor, polished and spotless, reflected his distorted face back at him. For years, he had walked these same halls in $1,000 suits, surrounded by assistants who moved at his command. Now he was invisible, just another worker nobody looked twice at. He wasn't sure why, but it felt liberating. Emily arrived a few minutes later, balancing a tray with 2 paper cups. "Morning now, Lauer," she greeted with that same disarming warmth. "Still alive after your first shift?" He chuckled lightly but said nothing more. "Barely." She laughed, handing him one of the coffees. "Then you'll need this more than I do." That became their quiet routine. Every evening at 7 p.m., before mopping the endless corridors, they'd share a coffee and talk, not about dreams or luxury, but about ordinary things. She told him about her mother, who had once been a nurse before falling ill, about her little brother Leo, who wanted to study engineering but had to drop out to work part-time. And Daniel listened, really listened, for the first time in years. He had always believed in efficiency, in numbers, in progress measured by charts and graphs. But now, standing beside Emily, he saw something none of his reports had ever shown him: the cost of his company's success. When she talked about struggling to pay rent, he thought of the boardroom decisions that had led to reduced wages. When she mentioned her mother skipping medication to save money, he remembered approving a supplier change to optimize costs. Every story hit him harder than the last. That night, during his break, Daniel wandered up to the 30th floor, the floor reserved for executives. He wasn't supposed to be there as a janitor, but old habits guided him. He stared at the closed office doors, the silent conference table, and the skyline stretching beyond the windows. He'd always thought this was the view that mattered. But from down below, with Emily, life had color, laughter, pain, hope. Up here, it was just glass and silence. Later that night, while cleaning the cafeteria, Daniel noticed Emily trying to fix a broken vending machine. She kicked it lightly and sighed. "Stupid thing ate my last dollar," she muttered. He chuckled. "Maybe it's saving you from bad coffee." "Easy for you to say," she teased. "You don't know what it's like counting every coin." He hesitated. "You're right, I don't." She smiled, not realizing how true that was. "Don't worry, someday I'll own a vending machine that always works. Maybe 2. Her optimism stunned him. Most people he knew had everything, yet complained constantly. Emily had nothing, yet she carried joy like a secret superpower. "Emily," he asked after a pause, "what keeps you going?" She looked down, thinking. "I guess it's people. You can lose money, jobs, even health. But if you still have kindness, you've got something no one can take away." Her words lingered long after they finished cleaning. By the 5th night, Daniel's body ached from scrubbing floors, but his mind was sharper than ever. He noticed things now. The janitors who skipped dinner to send money home, the guards who worked double shifts. He saw loyalty, resilience, and quiet dignity all around him. But the turning point came unexpectedly. As he emptied trash bins near the HR office, Daniel overheard 2 supervisors talking about layoffs, another efficiency plan coming down from upper management. His management.
Starting next week, the cleaning team's hours get cut. Half of them won't make rent. Daniel froze. Half of them? That meant Emily, too. He clenched his fists. The words he'd once approved without thought now sounded like cruelty. His name, his decisions were about to break the people who had unknowingly opened his eyes. He walked out into the hallway, heart pounding. Emily was there, wiping glass doors with quiet determination. "Hey," she said cheerfully. "You okay? You look pale." He nodded stiffly, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just, tired." But inside, something had shifted. For the first time, Daniel Scott, the billionaire who had everything, felt powerless. And in that helplessness, a new fire began to grow. He couldn't change who he was, but maybe, for the first time in his life, he could change what he stood for. Daniel barely slept that weekend. He kept thinking about the conversation he'd overheard, the layoffs, the pay cuts, the numbers that looked so harmless in spreadsheets but destroyed real lives outside the boardroom. He had signed hundreds of similar documents before, never imagining what they meant for people like Emily. Now, the reality pressed down on him like a weight he couldn't shake off. When Monday arrived, he returned to work as Dan the janitor. The same dull uniform, the same quiet elevator rides, but inside, something was different. He was watching, not as a billionaire pretending to be poor, but as a man seeing the world for the first time. The night began like any other. The hum of vacuum cleaners filled the corridors, the faint smell of disinfectant clung to the air, and Emily was there, bright-eyed, despite the exhaustion. She waved at him from the break room, holding 2 paper cups. "Your usual, Dan. 2 sugars, right?" He smiled, taking it. "You remember." "Of course. You're my coffee buddy," she said lightly. "Besides, you look like you need it." "Rough night ahead?" She shrugged. "Always. But, hey, at least I've got company." Daniel felt a sting in his chest, a mixture of gratitude and guilt. He saw him as a friend, not knowing he was the reason her paycheck was late last month. As the hours passed, he found small ways to help. He took heavier loads, cleaned the harder sections, and fixed equipment quietly when it broke. Emily noticed. "You're going to make the rest of us look bad," she teased one night. "Just trying to do my part," he replied softly. But behind those words, his thoughts were racing. He had access to the system, the codes, the departments, the files. The executive part of his brain began working again, but not for profit this time, for people. He started making anonymous adjustments through his phone when no one was looking, restoring deleted maintenance funds, reversing a recent wage cut order, approving the overdue safety supplies. No one suspected the janitor wiping the conference table was also the man rewriting the company's future in real time. Later that week, as they cleaned the lobby together, Emily leaned against her mop and asked, "Dan, if you could start over, just drop everything and live however you wanted, what would you do?" Daniel looked up at the tall windows glimmering with city lights. "Honestly, I'd build something that matters. Not just for profit, but for people. Maybe help those who've been forgotten." Emily smiled. "You sound like one of those motivational speakers."
He laughed. "Maybe, but it's true." Her expression softened. "I like that. The world needs more people who actually care." That night, while locking up the janitorial closet, Daniel thought about how empty his penthouse felt compared to the warm, genuine connection he shared here, with people who had nothing to prove, nothing to hide. He was supposed to stay undercover for 1 week, but every day made it harder to leave. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a CEO. He felt human. On the sixth night, a small accident changed everything. Emily was rushing to clean a spill in the stairwell when she slipped. The bucket toppled over, and water splashed everywhere. Daniel dropped his supplies and ran over. "Emily, are you okay?" he said, helping her sit up. She grimaced, but laughed weakly. "Yeah, just bruised my pride." He handed her his handkerchief, a silk one, the kind that didn't belong to a janitor. She noticed the initials stitched into the corner, D.S. "Wait," she said, narrowing her eyes. "Your name's Daniel Scott." For a second, he froze. The truth hung between them. He saw recognition dawn on her face. She had seen that name before, printed on the company's front gate, embossed on every official letter. You're him, aren't you?" she whispered, disbelief flooding her tone. Daniel sighed and nodded slowly. "Yes, but please, let me explain." Emily stepped back, her eyes wide. "You've been lying to me this whole time." "Not lying," he said quietly. "Just trying to understand. I needed to see what life is like for the people who keep this place running. I thought I knew my company, Emily, but I didn't. You showed me what I was too blind to see." She crossed her arms, hurt flickering in her expression. "You could have just talked to us. You didn't have to play some experiment." Daniel swallowed hard. "You're right. But if I had come as your boss, you wouldn't have spoken to me like this. You wouldn't have told me about your family, or your brother, or how you keep this place going with nothing but hope and hard work. I didn't want reports or data. I wanted truth." Silence stretched between them. The sound of the night shift carried faintly through the hall. Vacuums, footsteps, the rhythm of work that never stopped. Finally, Emily sighed. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now, Daniel, but I do believe you mean what you said." He nodded slowly. "That's all I can ask." She handed back his handkerchief. "Keep it. You're going to need it when the board finds out what you've been up to." Despite the tension, Daniel chuckled. "Probably." That night, as Emily limped away, Daniel stood alone in the quiet corridor, his reflection staring back at him through the glass door of his own empire. He had built an empire of steel and glass, but it took a janitor's mop and a girl's kindness to show him what real strength looked like. And though she might not have realized it yet, Emily had already changed him in ways no amount of money ever could. The mask had fallen, and now Daniel Scott would have to decide who he truly wanted to be when the truth spread beyond those walls. The next morning, whispers spread through Scott Enterprises like wildfire. Someone from the night shift had snapped a photo, the billionaire CEO, Daniel Scott, wearing a janitor's uniform, pushing a mop through the corridors. By sunrise, it was all over the company's internal chat channels. Is this real? Why would he do that? Has he lost his mind? Daniel's phone buzzed non-stop, dozens of calls from board members, hundreds of messages, but he ignored them all. For the first time, the noise didn't matter. What mattered was the people who saw him as one of them. He walked into the headquarters through the main doors that morning, not in a suit, but still in his janitor's uniform. Every head turned. Secretaries froze mid-step. Executives whispered behind their screens. He didn't stop for anyone, just kept walking, each step echoing with purpose. When he entered the boardroom, the conversation died instantly.
"Daniel," said Arthur Graves, the senior board chairman, his voice sharp and cold, "would you like to explain why the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation has been mopping floors?" Daniel placed his security badge on the table. "Because I forgot what it felt like to earn a living the way most people do here. I wanted to understand what life was like for the people who built this company from the ground up, the people we've stopped seeing." Arthur scoffed. "You've embarrassed this entire institution. Do you realize what this has done to our image? Daniel met his glare calmly. Maybe it's time our image changed. Murmurs rippled across the table. Some executives avoided eye contact. Others looked curious, even inspired. I saw what happens when our policies hit the ground, Daniel continued. People skipping meals, taking double shifts, losing hope because of decisions we make up here. That ends today. Arthur slammed his hand on the table. You're not making unilateral changes, Daniel. The board answers to people, too. We forgot that. The tension in the room could have shattered glass, but Daniel didn't back down. For the first time, he wasn't speaking as a CEO. He was speaking as a man who had finally woken up. The day of the board meeting arrived. Daniel stood in front of the tall glass tower of Scott Enterprises, wearing the same Navy janitor uniform he had worn during his undercover week. The morning wind tugged at the sleeves, and for the first time in years, he felt completely at peace. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a man who finally knew what mattered. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Every executive had taken their seat, the long table gleaming under the recessed lights. The large company logo shone on the wall like a reminder of the empire built on ambition and the mistakes that came with it. Arthur Graves, ever stern and proper, began the meeting. Daniel Scott, this board convenes today to discuss your recent conduct, which has caused both public scrutiny and internal unrest. Your behavior has been unconventional, to say the least. Many believe it's tarnished this company's reputation. Daniel placed both hands on the table. Then let me tell you what I've learned. He looked around at the men and women who had shared the same airless boardrooms for years. Some watched with curiosity, others with disdain. I built this company to succeed, Daniel began. But along the way, I stopped seeing the people who made that success possible. I wore suits worth more than some employees' salaries, and I justified it by saying I earned it. But what I really earned was distance, from reality, from compassion, from truth. He paused, scanning their faces. Last week, I worked alongside the janitors. I scrubbed the floors, emptied bins, and shared meals with people who work harder than any of us. And do you know what I found? No one answered. Dignity, grace, people who give everything to this place and ask for so little in return. He took a breath. We forgot what our success costs, but we can fix that, not with statements, but with choices. Fair wages, safer conditions, real respect. Arthur folded his arms. And what do you think that will do to our profit margins? Daniel met his gaze calmly. Maybe it will shrink them for a while, but it will grow something far more valuable. Loyalty, integrity, trust. The kind of foundation that doesn't collapse when the market does. The room went quiet. Another board member, Lydia Harper, cleared her throat. You realize, Daniel, that your proposal means cutting your own salary by nearly 80%? Daniel nodded. I already signed the paperwork. Gasps rippled through the room. Arthur's eyes narrowed. You're serious? Completely, Daniel said. I'm not asking anyone to follow if I won't lead. There was a long silence. Then Lydia smiled faintly. Maybe the world could use more leaders like you. Arthur said nothing, but the fire in his eyes dimmed, replaced by reluctant respect. When Daniel left the meeting, the building felt lighter. He stepped outside into the sunlight, the noise of the city blending into a gentle hum. For the first time, he felt he could breathe again.
A familiar voice called from behind him. Hey, janitor. He turned. Emily stood by the steps, holding 2 coffee cups. The same brand, the same aroma,
rich and sweet. "I heard you just took on a boardroom full of suits," she said with a teasing smile. He chuckled. "Something like that." "So what now?" she asked, handing him a cup. Daniel took it, his eyes softening. "Now I rebuild, but this time I'll do it right." They walked together through the park across the street, the city skyline gleaming beyond the trees. Birds darted between the branches, and the afternoon sun painted the sky gold. Emily sipped her coffee. "You know, I didn't think billionaires knew how to apologize." He smiled. "Most don't. I just had a very good teacher." She looked up at him. "And what did this teacher tell you?" "That kindness," he said quietly, "isn't weakness. It's the one thing that makes everything else worth fighting for." They stopped near a fountain, watching the water shimmer. For a moment, neither spoke. The world seemed to slow down. Just two people, standing side by side, connected not by wealth or power, but by something simpler and stronger. Weeks later, change began to ripple through Scott Enterprises. The janitorial staff received full benefits for the first time in company history. Overtime pay was reinstated. New safety programs were launched. The cafeteria opened a scholarship fund in honor of Emily's late mother, fully financed by Daniel himself. When journalists asked why he'd done it, Daniel simply replied, "Because success means nothing if you have to step on people to reach it." The story went viral again, but this time not as a scandal. It became a symbol of transformation. One evening, long after the excitement faded, Daniel sat in the break room with Emily. The place was quiet, filled with the soft buzz of vending machines and the faint scent of coffee. "Funny," Emily said, smiling. "This is where it all started, the first cup of coffee I gave you." Daniel nodded, a hint of nostalgia in his expression. "Back then, I thought I was just pretending to be someone else. Turns out I was finally becoming who I should have been all along." She looked at him warmly. "You know, Dan, maybe you didn't go undercover to understand us. Maybe you went undercover to understand yourself." He chuckled softly. "You might be right." They clinked their cups together, a quiet toast to new beginnings. And as they sat there, the janitor and the girl who brought him coffee, the man who once measured worth in dollars, realized something simple, something timeless. The richest people aren't the ones with the most wealth. They're the ones who give the most away. Meanwhile, Emily tried to keep her head down. After the photo leaked, everyone knew who she was, the girl who worked beside the billionaire. Some whispered that she'd been planted as part of his stunt. Others said that she was his secret project. The rumors cut deep. She avoided eye contact in the hallways, skipped her breaks, and stayed long after her shift ended just to avoid the stares. When Daniel showed up at the maintenance room that evening, she didn't look up. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "People already think I knew." "I know," she said softly, "but I needed to see you." "Why?" she asked, finally turning toward him. "To fix things, because you can't fix this, Daniel. You don't know what it's like having everyone look at you like you don't belong, not because of who you are, but because of who they think you know." He took a step closer, his voice low. "Emily, I never meant for you to get caught in this. I'll make it right." Her eyes softened, but held firm. "Don't make promises you can't keep." For a moment, the room was silent except for the soft hum of the vending machine. Daniel wanted to tell her everything, the board meeting, the changes he planned, the policies he was fighting to reverse. But he knew words wouldn't fix what had been broken. Only actions would.
The following week was chaos. The press had picked up the story. Billionaire goes undercover as janitor? Real or PR stunt? Cameras gathered outside the company gates. Reporters shouted questions. Some employees defended him, others called for his resignation. But behind the noise, something remarkable began to happen. Employees started sharing their own stories about unfair overtime, unsafe conditions, lack of healthcare support. They spoke up because Daniel had. The truth was no longer buried under spreadsheets and polite silence. Daniel spent those days in the thick of it, talking with janitors, clerks, technicians, and drivers. He sat with them, asked questions, and listened, really listened. And quietly, changes began to appear. The cafeteria added affordable meal plans. The HR department reinstated canceled benefits. The cleaning crew received new equipment and higher pay. The company was changing, not because of policy, but because someone had finally seen them. But success never comes without a cost. During one late-night cleanup, Emily found Daniel sitting on a bench near the parking lot, staring into the distance. "Rough day?" she asked, handing him a cup of coffee. He smiled faintly. "The board's not happy. Some of them want me out. They say I've gone soft." "Maybe you've just gone human," she said, sitting beside him. He looked at her, grateful. "Are you still angry with me?" "Maybe a little," she admitted with a smile. "But I see what you're trying to do now, and I think your heart's in the right place." He exhaled slowly. "I couldn't have done it without you." Emily shook her head. "Don't give me that credit. I just brought you coffee." Daniel looked down at the cup, steam curling in the cool air. "Sometimes kindness changes everything." They sat in silence for a long time. No titles, no lies, just two people who had found something rare in a world of numbers and noise: understanding. But deep down, Daniel knew the fight wasn't over. The next board meeting would decide whether he stayed as CEO or walked away for good. And for the first time, he didn't care about the title. He only cared about what he stood for. Because if wealth meant nothing without compassion, then maybe losing it all would finally make him rich in the ways that mattered most. The day of the board meeting arrived. Daniel stood in front of the tall glass tower of Scott Enterprises, wearing the same Navy janitor uniform he had worn during his undercover week. The morning wind tugged at the sleeves, carrying with it the scent of coffee from the nearby street vendors and the distant hum of city traffic. For the first time in years, he felt completely at peace. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a man who finally knew what mattered. His reflection stared back at him from the pristine windows, and he barely recognized himself, not because of the uniform, but because of what he saw in his own eyes. Humility, purpose, and a quiet determination that had been absent for too long. He had spent a week scrubbing floors, emptying trash bins, and listening to the stories of people he had once passed without a second glance. Now, he was about to face the consequences and the opportunity that came with that choice. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Every executive had taken their seat around the long mahogany table that gleamed under the recessed lights. The air was thick with tension and the faint smell of expensive cologne. The large company logo shone on the wall like a reminder of the empire built on ambition and the mistakes that came with it. Portraits of past executives lined the walls, their stern faces seeming to judge the scene unfolding below them. Daniel's arrival caused a visible stir. Some executives whispered to each other, eyebrows raised at his choice to appear in his janitor's uniform. Others stared with barely concealed contempt. A few looked genuinely curious, leaning forward in their leather chairs as if witnessing something unprecedented. Arthur Graves, the board's most senior member, ever stern and proper, began the meeting with the tap of his gavel. "Daniel Scott," he said crisply, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "this board convenes today to discuss your recent conduct, which has caused both public scrutiny and internal unrest. Your behavior has been unconventional, to say the least. Many believe it's tarnished this company's reputation. Shareholders are concerned. The media has had a field day. What do you have to say for yourself?"
Daniel placed both hands on the table, feeling the cool surface beneath his palms. He had rehearsed this moment 100 times in his mind, but now that it was here, he found himself speaking from somewhere deeper than preparation, from the heart. "Then let me tell you what I've learned," he said, his voice steady and clear. He looked around at the men and women who had shared the same airless boardrooms for years. Some watched with curiosity, others with disdain. A few avoided his gaze entirely, uncomfortable with the raw honesty about to unfold. "I built this company to succeed," Daniel began, his voice growing stronger with each word. "But along the way, I stopped seeing the people who made that success possible. I wore suits worth more than some employees' annual salaries, and I justified it by saying I earned it. I told myself I deserved every luxury, every privilege, every shortcut. But what I really earned was distance, from reality, from compassion, from truth. I became isolated in an ivory tower of my own making, surrounded by yes-men and financial reports that reduced human beings to line items and budget cuts." He paused, scanning their faces, watching as some expressions softened while others hardened. "Last week, I worked alongside the janitors. I scrubbed the floors until my back ached. I emptied bins that smelled of week-old lunches and spilled coffee. I shared meals with people who work harder than any of us sitting in this room, people who arrive before dawn and leave after sunset, all for wages that barely cover rent. And do you know what I found?" No one answered. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic from the streets below. "Dignity," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Grace, resilience. People who give everything to this place and ask for so little in return. People who know each other's children's names, who cover shifts when someone is sick, who celebrate small victories together because they understand what really matters. They have something we've lost up here. They have community. They have purpose beyond profit margins." He took a breath, steadying himself. "We forgot what our success costs. We forgot that every percentage point of increased efficiency represents a person working harder, faster, with less support. But we can fix that, not with PR statements or token gestures, but with real choices. Fair wages that actually reflect the cost of living, safer conditions that don't cut corners, healthcare benefits that don't leave families bankrupted by medical emergencies. Real respect, not just corporate slogans about valuing our team." Arthur folded his arms, his jaw tight. "And what do you think that will do to our profit margins? Have you considered our shareholders, our quarterly targets? We have obligations, Daniel." He met his gaze calmly, without flinching. "Maybe it will shrink them for a while. Perhaps the next few quarters won't look as impressive on paper, but it will grow something far more valuable. Loyalty, integrity, trust. The kind of foundation that doesn't collapse when the market does. The kind of company people are proud to work for, not just afraid to lose their job at. We'll build something sustainable, something meaningful, something that lasts beyond the next earnings call." The room went quiet. A clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the passage of seconds that felt like hours.
Another board member, Lydia Harper, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes who had been with the company since its early days, cleared her throat. "You realize, Daniel, that your proposal means cutting your own salary by nearly 80%. You're talking about giving up penthouses, vacation homes, private jets. Are you prepared for that?" Daniel nodded without hesitation. "I already signed the paperwork this morning. My attorney has it. The salary reduction takes effect immediately, and the difference will be redistributed into the Employee Benefit Fund." Gasps rippled through the room. Arthur's eyes narrowed, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. "You're serious? You actually did it?" "Completely," Daniel said, his voice unwavering. "I'm not asking anyone to follow if I won't lead. I won't demand sacrifice from others while I hoard wealth. If we're going to change, it starts with me. And if this board votes to remove me, I'll accept that decision. But I won't compromise on treating people with basic human decency." There was a long silence. Then Lydia smiled faintly, a glimmer of something like pride in her eyes. "Maybe the world could use more leaders like you, Daniel. God knows corporate America needs them." Arthur said nothing for a long moment, but slowly, gradually, the fire in his eyes dimmed, replaced with something that looked like reluctant respect. Finally, he spoke. "This is going to be a long road, but perhaps it's the right one." When Daniel left the meeting 3 hours later, after votes were cast and policies drafted, the building felt lighter. He stepped outside into the sunlight, the noise of the city blending into a gentle hum. The afternoon sun warmed his face, and the stress that had been coiled in his shoulders for months began to unwind. For the first time in what felt like forever, he could breathe again. Really breathe. A familiar voice called from behind him. "Hey, Janitor!" He turned. Emily stood by the steps, holding 2 coffee cups, her hair catching the golden light. She wore the same warm smile that had first made him question everything. The same brand, the same aroma, rich and sweet. "I heard you just took on a boardroom full of suits," she said with a teasing smile. "Word travels fast in this building. How'd it go?" I chuckled, relief flooding through me. "Something like that. Let's just say I'm still employed and we have a lot of work to do." "So what now?" she asked, handing him a cup, their fingers brushing briefly. He took it, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "Now, I rebuild. But this time, I'll do it right. With the right priorities, the right values, and the right people to keep me honest." They walked together through the park across the street, the city skyline gleaming beyond the trees. Birds darted between the branches, and the afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of gold and amber. The grass was still green despite the autumn chill, and children played on swings in the distance, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Emily sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "You know, I didn't think billionaires knew how to apologize. Most of the ones I read about just hire lawyers and PR firms." He smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Most don't. I just had a very good teacher who wasn't afraid to tell me the truth, even when it was hard to hear." She looked up at him, curiosity dancing in her expression. "And what did this teacher tell you?" "That kindness," he said quietly, watching the fountain ahead of them, "isn't weakness. It's the one thing that makes everything else worth fighting for. It's what separates us from machines calculating profit and loss. It's what makes us human." They stopped near a fountain, watching the water shimmer and dance in the fading light. For a moment, neither spoke. The world seemed to slow down. Just 2 people, standing side by side, connected not by wealth or power or corporate hierarchy, but by something simpler and infinitely stronger. Weeks later, change began to ripple through Scott Enterprises, like waves spreading across a pond. The janitorial staff received full benefits for the first time in company history: health insurance, dental, vision, and paid time off. Overtime pay was reinstated with retroactive compensation. New safety programs were launched with input from the workers themselves. The cafeteria opened a scholarship fund in honor of Emily's late mother, a woman who had worked 3 jobs to put Emily through school. Fully financed by Daniel himself, with enough capital to support dozens of students annually. When journalists asked why he'd done it, Daniel simply replied, "Because success means nothing if you have to step on people to reach it. Real leadership means lifting others up, not climbing over them." The story went viral again, but this time not as a scandal or a spectacle. It became a symbol of transformation, a case study in business schools, a conversation starter at dinner tables. Other companies began to watch, some with skepticism, others with genuine interest in replicating the model.
One evening, long after the excitement faded and the cameras moved on to other stories, Daniel sat in the break room with Emily. The place was quiet, filled with the soft buzz of vending machines and the faint scent of fresh coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a warm, familiar glow. "Funny," Emily said, smiling as she cradled her cup. "This is where it all started. The first cup of coffee I gave you. You looked so lost that day, trying to figure out the coffee maker." Daniel nodded, a hint of nostalgia in his expression, his eyes distant with memory. "Back then I thought I was just pretending to be someone else, playing a role to gather information. Turns out I was finally becoming who I should have been all along. Maybe that person was always there, just buried under years of corporate armor." She looked at him warmly, her voice soft. "You know, Dan, maybe you didn't go undercover to understand us. Maybe you went undercover to understand yourself, to find the parts of you that got lost somewhere between ambition and achievement." He chuckled softly, shaking his head at the truth of it. "You might be right. You usually are." They clinked their cups together, a quiet toast to new beginnings, to second chances, to the courage it takes to change. And as they sat there, the janitor and the girl who brought him coffee, the man who once measured worth in dollars, realized something simple, something timeless, something his father had tried to teach him years ago before the company consumed everything. The richest people aren't the ones with the most wealth. They're the ones who give the most away. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.